The Galactic Accord, a powerful alliance of dozens of ancient spacefaring civilizations, had finally accepted humanity, but not with open arms. They were the youngest, the least advanced, and seen by most as a noisy, primitive race barely out of their solar system. As a gesture of support, the Council assigned Earth its first official starship. It was called the GSV Vesper, a ship so old its records were buried in a forgotten archive, rusting in orbit over a forgotten moon. When Commander Alara Miles and her crew first laid eyes on it, no one said a word. The ship was a mess, a patchwork of ancient alloys, cracked hull plates sealed with mismatched materials and engines that looked like they hadn't run in centuries. Other races laughed. Some even sent messages calling the ship a floating grave. The humans, however, didn't laugh. They boarded. Alara Miles had been chosen carefully, brilliant, composed, and known for her ability to lead people through impossible odds. Her crew was small but capable: a sharp-minded engineer named Rafi, a theoretical physicist named Dr. Anaya Patel, a communications officer who could speak 5 alien languages fluently, and an old military AI from Earth's last war, now stored in a portable cube-shaped housing. The AI's name was Crate, short for Combat Recon and Tactical Entity. It was sarcastic, grumpy, and full of experience. Alara kept it close. Inside the Vesper, the ship groaned like something alive but dying. Lights flickered, air filters choked with dust, and the main corridor still smelled faintly of scorched metal and old oil. "How is this thing still even floating?" Rafi muttered, running a diagnostic on a half-melted console. Dr. Patel knelt beside an access panel, her fingers brushing over an alien control matrix she'd never seen before. "This doesn't match any Accord tech," she said softly. "This entire section of the ship, it's not on the blueprint." The further they explored, the stranger things became. Deep in the belly of the ship, behind layers of sealed bulkheads and forgotten storage rooms, they found it. A chamber no larger than a cargo bay but built entirely differently. Smooth black metal walls humming faintly with unseen energy surrounded a core of machinery that seemed to breathe, pulsing slowly like a giant heart. Floating symbols, unreadable and glowing with soft blue light, circled above it. Not a single Accord database could identify the technology they called the Council. After several hours, a transmission came from a bored-looking alien diplomat. "You've found remnants of a pre-Accord experiment, possibly from the vanished race known as the Architects. Long extinct. Best not to touch it. That tech was unstable, likely useless." The message ended with a polite tone, but the message was clear. Forget about it. Don't get in over your heads and stay out of trouble. Alara stood in silence with her crew, watching the core pulse. The ship around them was dead, but this part, it felt awake. She could feel something, a quiet pull at the back of her mind like the gentle tug of gravity. Crate, the AI, flickered to life in her palm. "Commander, I advise we follow the Council's recommendation." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes were fixed on the floating glyphs. "Do we know what this could do?" "No," Dr. Patel said. "It might be nothing. Or it might be everything." A long silence passed. Then Alara said very quietly, "We're touching it." Rafi raised his eyebrows but didn't protest. He stepped forward, careful and slow, and placed a diagnostic tool against the smooth surface of the core. Instantly, the tool went dark. The symbols above began to spin faster, rearranging themselves. Crate let out a sharp digital ping, alerting all systems. Then the lights across the ship brightened, power surging through ancient conduits like a river breaking a dam. Alarms blared, but not from human systems. The ship's own voice came online, deep, layered, not fully mechanical. It echoed through every corridor, every deck, and even the air shimmered faintly. The words came slowly, in a language they shouldn't have understood, yet somehow did. "Alara." "Miles," the voice said. She froze. Her crew stared at her. "Did that just say your name?" Rafi asked, barely above a whisper. Alara didn't respond. The core pulsed brighter. Symbols shifted again. some now matching Terran letters forming words she hadn't seen before. She took a step forward, heart pounding. The ship wasn't just alive, it was aware, and somehow, it knew her. "We didn't register with the system," Dr. Patel said, her voice shaky. "It recognized her. This wasn't random." Crate buzzed nervously. "Commander, this is no longer a scrap ship. This is an artifact, and it's waking up." As the core began to spin, the floor beneath them trembled slightly. Somewhere above them, long-dead engines began to hum. Not as before, this was no mechanical startup. It was like something was remembering how to live again, a forgotten machine, reaching back into reality. The ship whispered once more, louder, this time. "Ilara. Directive. Selective adaptation. Drift path. Available. Shall we begin?" Everyone turned to her. She had no idea what the words meant, but she understood one thing. This was no normal mission. This wasn't exploration. This was discovery at a level no species had dared to dream. Ilara took a breath. The future had just changed. And it had started with the weakest ship in the galaxy. When Commander Ilara Miles gave the order to activate the unknown core, none of the crew truly expected it to work. Certainly not like this. The ship didn't move in the way normal vessels did. There was no countdown, no shift in acceleration, no feeling of motion. One moment they were standing in the strange chamber below Deck 4, staring at the glowing symbols above the humming drive, and the next, everything was gone. The lights blinked out, gravity faded, and a strange warmth filled the air, as though they had stepped inside a memory. Outside the Vesper, stars twisted like paint in water, forming impossible spirals and ribbons of color that made no sense, shapes folding in and out of view. Rafi gripped a rail tightly, his eyes wide as he stared at the swirling cosmos beyond the cracked viewport. "We're not in real space anymore," he said quietly. "Where are we?" Ilara didn't answer because even she didn't know. Time began acting oddly. Dr. Patel reported that a sensor drone had aged 50 years in 10 seconds, and then reverted to its original condition when no one was looking. Crate, the combat AI, was processing so many paradoxes it had to shut down parts of itself to stay stable. The Vesper wasn't moving through normal space. It was somewhere else, somewhere in between. The place they later came to call the Drift. Here thoughts echoed back like sound in a cave, but instead of returning as noise, they came back as change. Rafi muttered about fixing a broken control panel, and the panel simply repaired itself in front of them, wires snapping into place like time was rewinding. Dr. Patel imagined what the ship might have looked like in its prime, and for a brief moment, the walls around them shimmered with clean metal, bright lights, and the faint echo of voices long vanished. It was terrifying and beautiful all at once. The ship wasn't just reacting, it was responding like it understood them on a level deeper than speech. Ilara began to suspect that it wasn't simply alive. It was listening. Then they found the logs. Not in any language they recognized, but the Vesper translated them slowly, drawing on the crew's minds to fill in the gaps. The architects, the extinct race the Council had written off as a myth, had not only built this ship, they had used it to shape reality itself. According to the logs, the Vesper wasn't a battleship or an explorer. It was a Seeker-class drift vessel, capable of entering unstable folds of reality and altering outcomes through thought-coded algorithms. But it wasn't magic. The logs described it like a tool, powerful, dangerous, and very sensitive to the will of its users. That explained the shifting timelines, the sudden changes, and the eerie way the ship seemed to anticipate their choices. It was made for minds. The stronger the mind, the stronger the effect. Testing was cautious at first. They imagined lights, turning on, and they did. They wished for tools and found them in nearby storage lockers. They asked for data, and the ship answered with streams of lost knowledge. But the real test came when one of the crew, a quiet technician named Harlan, fell through a failing floor panel and broke his leg. The med kit was empty. On instinct, Ilara focused. Just a thought, a wish that they had something to help him. The light shifted. A small case, glowing faintly, appeared near her foot. Inside was a complete medical kit, fully stocked. Harlan was patched up in minutes. That changed everything. They began mapping the drift. Patel theorized that it wasn't a place exactly, but a state. A layer behind normal reality where cause and effect were loose, like threads waiting to be pulled into a pattern. Time wasn't fixed here. Events blurred, repeated, or vanished entirely depending on attention and intent. At one point, the crew watched a recorded conversation of themselves from 2 days in the future, only to realize they hadn't had that conversation yet. Every action in the drift left ripples, echoes of what could be or might have been. Eventually, the Vesper guided them, yes, guided, back toward real space. The ship made no sound, but they all felt it. A subtle pressure, a tug toward what felt familiar. The stars twisted again, folded inward like origami, and then, without warning, they dropped out of the drift. Systems stabilized. Gravity returned. Sensors reinitialized. At first, everything looked normal, but when Crate cross-checked the galactic clock, he went silent. They hadn't been gone for a day, or even hours. According to every reliable timestamp, they had returned 7 days before they had left. Ilara stared at the numbers, her voice low. "We've gone back in time." No one moved. The implication hit all of them at once. Not only had they traveled through the drift, they had changed when they returned, and the Vesper remembered everything. It carried the logs, the experiences, even a perfect simulation of events that hadn't happened yet. The ship was learning, evolving with them. And now, it held the potential to do much more than travel. Patel summed it up best. This ship doesn't just move through space, it moves through possibility. Ilara nodded slowly. Her eyes moved toward the core, still pulsing with that strange, quiet rhythm. They had been given the weakest ship in the Accord. An afterthought. A joke. But it wasn't a joke anymore. The Vesper was a key to something far older and far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. And now the crew had a choice. Report what they had found and let others take control, or keep going deeper into the drift, where reality itself could be rewritten. Ilara looked at her crew. "Set course," she said softly. "We're not done yet." And deep within the ship, the lights responded, glowing brighter, like it had been waiting to hear those words all along. News travels fast across the stars, especially when it carries fear. Within days of the Vesper's strange return from the drift, whispers became warnings. The Galactic Accord, once only mildly amused by humanity's presence, now turned suspicious. Somehow, the weakest ship, the one they had given away like spare junk, had reappeared changed, powered by something far beyond any approved technology. No one had forgotten the legends about the architects, the race that vanished long before most current civilizations were born. Their technology had been buried, sealed, or destroyed for a reason. And now, the humans had brought part of it back, to life. Reports poured in, of stars dimming for seconds, of reality bending in certain sectors, of time rippling like a disturbed lake. The Accord convened an emergency session and voted to demand the Vesper's surrender. But Earth refused. Ilara Miles expected the message. It came with polite wording and sharp edges. Surrender the vessel for containment and research, or face immediate consequences. Behind those words was fear. Fear of what the Vesper could do and who might control it. But Ilara wasn't interested in power. She wanted understanding. She and her crew had seen the drift, had touched what lay beyond normal space, and felt the ship respond not just to commands but to intent. The Vesper was a mirror, not a machine. It reflected the thoughts and beliefs of those who guided it. And if handled carelessly, it could warp not just space but entire realities. While debates continued in diplomatic chambers across the stars, stranger threats began to emerge. Old warning systems flared to life in dead regions of space. Ghost. Fleets made of impossible designs appeared without origin. These were not living crews but fragments, shattered pieces of ancient architect vessels running incomplete programs. They acted like memories repeating themselves, trapped in loops of war and loss. The Accord named them Echo Fleets, and soon, these echoes were not content to remain silent. One appeared near a border colony, flickering in and out of phase. It fired on a patrol ship, vanished, then reappeared 3 days earlier in a different system. The timelines were breaking, and someone had started the chain reaction. Ilara gathered her crew in the Vesper's command chamber, the once dark walls now lit with flowing patterns that adjusted to their presence. "They think we're the danger," she said quietly. "But I think we've just uncovered the warning signs." Dr. Patel nodded, her face pale. "The Echo Fleets are drawn to drift activity. Every time we open a path, we pull them closer." Rafi leaned against a panel, arms folded. "So what's the plan? Hide, hand it over, or keep going?" Ilara looked around at them. They weren't soldiers. They were explorers, thinkers, and one aging AI with a bitter personality and a long memory. "We map the drift," she said. "We learn its shape, its rules, and we figure out how to stop these echoes from breaking into our world. If we run, someone else will find this tech. If we give it up, it'll be used without care. We're the ones who touched it first, and the ship chose us." It was then that they encountered the architect AI. It appeared not through screens or speakers, but as a shimmering figure in the air, built from light and language. It called itself Yelkai, and it did not smile. Its voice was deep, layered with old echoes, like many versions of itself speaking at once. "This vessel is not a ship," it said. "It is a seed. What you grow with it depends on who you are. But know this, drift tech does not obey its users. It amplifies them. If you carry fear, it will echo fear. If you seek truth, it will mirror that too. But do not lie to it. It will believe you and shape the world accordingly." Before Ilara could ask more, Yelkai faded, leaving only a warning and the sound of pulsing light. The Accord's patience finally broke. A fleet of warships appeared on long-range scans, approaching fast. They were not coming to talk. The message was simple: stand down or be destroyed. Ilara stood at the center of the bridge, eyes fixed on the growing swarm of lights. Dozens of ships, some armed with weapons that could split moons, others with devices to shut down systems remotely. "We can't fight them," Rafi said. "Not with guns, no," Ilara agreed. "But we don't need guns." The drift responded when they entered it, so what would happen if they let it protect them? She took her place near the core, and the Vesper hummed in answer. As the fleet locked on, Ilara focused, not on fear, but clarity. She thought of peace, of possibilities, of what the Accord might become if it saw through fear instead of acting from it. The ship pulsed once, and then reality unraveled. Missiles launched but turned into harmless trails of dust. Beams of energy struck nothing as space looped around the Vesper, folding into itself. Time twisted. One Accord ship circled the Vesper, only to find itself seconds earlier, repeating the same maneuver in confusion. A pilot fired, blinked, and found himself years in the past, watching his own academy graduation. The fleet panicked. They hadn't come to face a weapon. They had come to face change itself. The Vesper did not destroy. It rewrote. It turned war into hesitation, fear into confusion, and confusion into wonder. When the effect ended, the fleet was scattered, not by damage, but by awe. None had been hurt, but none could explain what they had seen. Ilara opened a channel. Her voice was calm. "We don't want war. We want to understand. Let us, or follow us, and be changed." And then the Vesper turned again, slipping back, into the drift, leaving only a trail of possibility behind. The Vesper's quiet victory echoed far beyond the battlefield. Word spread quickly, across stars, through encrypted channels, into council chambers and command rooms. The humans had done the unthinkable. They hadn't just stopped a fleet. They had bent space, time, and memory without firing a single weapon. Some races saw it as proof of wisdom, of a species willing to think beyond destruction. Others saw only danger. To them, the Vesper was not a ship, it was a cosmic fault line. And now, the accord was cracking. Debates turned into arguments. Alliances shifted. Some civilizations rallied to Earth's side, believing the humans might bring new balance. Others demanded immediate sanctions. Accusations of a secret human agenda filled the galactic net. Fear swelled. But behind the political noise, a far greater problem had begun to grow. The drift was spreading. The crew noticed it first. Navigation. Systems picked up irregular space readings in distant sectors, places untouched by the Vesper, yet showing signs of drift expansion. Stars flickered strangely. Asteroid belts shifted, as though pushed by unseen forces. One unstable system collapsed, entirely, swallowed in a burst of spatial distortion. The drift was no longer just a hidden layer of reality. It was awakening, and it didn't seem to be waiting for anyone's permission. Raffi ran constant diagnostics, frustrated at how the Vesper's own data kept changing. Timelines inside the ship began looping. Doors opened before anyone touched them. Dr. Patel started seeing events before they happened, and even Crate, the ship's battle-hardened AI, began showing signs of confusion, resetting parts of its memory just to stay functional. Then came the worst moment. One of the crew, a young analyst named Kale, vanished. It wasn't dramatic. No bright light, no sound. He had been monitoring a rift window trying to understand how the drift interacted with time, when his voice cut off mid-sentence. When they checked the corridor, it was empty. Hours later, he reappeared confused and shaken, but something was wrong. He kept repeating himself, living the same hour over and over. He couldn't see them anymore. He spoke to ghosts, versions, of the crew that weren't there. Patel's eyes filled with tears. He's trapped in a feedback loop. He's stuck between moments. They tried everything. Nothing worked. Kale remained, but not as he was. And the drift kept growing. Ilara began to question everything. She walked the halls alone, sometimes seeing old memories replay across the walls. Her first mission, her mother's final message, even Earth, shining blue and distant. The Vesper didn't just obey. It felt, and if it mirrored the crew, then every doubt, every fear, every hope was now a ripple through space. One night she stood before the ship's heart, watching its gentle pulse, the soft glow of its language flowing across the walls like starlight on water. "Should I destroy you?" she whispered, "before someone else uses you wrong?" And then the ship showed her something. The walls darkened. The core expanded its light outward, and in the space around her, a vision unfolded. Not a memory, but a possibility. A galactic council, but different. No divisions, no cold power struggles. A shared circle with species working together not because they feared war, but because they understood each other. Humans, not leading with force, but guiding. Offering knowledge, offering a path forward. Drift ships flying not as weapons but as bridges. Children of different worlds growing up together under one sky. She saw herself, older, speaking to leaders not in threat but in truth. "The future is not written," she said in the vision. "It is shaped." The vision faded. The core dimmed again. The Vesper waited. She returned to the crew, her voice firm. "We have a chance," she said, "not to conquer, not to run, but to fix what's broken. The accord was built in fear. We can rewrite that. We can change the moment it began and build it again the right way." There was silence, heavy and full of risk. Raffi finally nodded. "We'll lose everything we know," Patel added, "or gain everything we hope for." Crate, surprisingly quiet, simply said, "Then we do it smart, no mistakes." The ship readied itself. The core expanded again, brighter this time. Systems across the Vesper aligned in ways they hadn't before, as if the vessel was now in full agreement with their decision. This wasn't a jump through space. It was a step back into possibility itself. They weren't aiming for a star. They were aiming for a moment, the day the Galactic Accord was born, when the first signatures were written in fear and compromise instead of trust. It was a moment carefully hidden behind layers of ceremony and secrecy, but the Vesper could find it, because now time was not a line, it was a canvas. As the ship powered up, the air grew still. Symbols across the chamber shimmered like ripples on glass. Reality began to soften. The core spoke for the first time since the drift awakened. "Show me your future." And with that, the Vesper launched, not forward but inward, into the deepest fold of what might have been, to reshape the very foundation of the galaxy. The Vesper cut through the drift like a thought moving through memory, silent, fast and full of purpose. The crew was tense but determined. They were not going to fight or conquer. They had chosen something harder. They were going to change a moment, perhaps the most important moment in modern galactic history. The founding of the Galactic Accord. The Vesper had locked onto the date, the location, and the emotional weight in that single point in time. Back then, the Accord had been built from fear, an alliance formed not for peace, but for defense. Species had gathered to prevent war, not to build something better. That fear had shaped the rules, the politics, the distrust. And now, centuries later, it was cracking under its own pressure. The Vesper would return to that beginning, not to erase it, but to reshape it. As the ship entered the fold, space blurred and time pulled tight. They passed ghost images of the past, wars half fought, meetings half finished, moments frozen in delay. The ship shook, reality resisting change, but Alara stood firm at the core, steady as a star. The Accord's founding world appeared ahead, a green-blue planet ringed with ships of dozens of species. Below, ancient diplomats prepared to sign the agreement that would bind them together. But the moment was fragile. The past, they learned quickly, did not like interference. Time resisted. Events looped. The same speech repeated 3 times before. It finally moved forward. A diplomat from the Varkari species was killed, then alive, then missing entirely. The timeline bent, trying to force itself back into its original shape. Dr. Patel warned that too much pressure could cause a full fracture, tearing the memory of the galaxy apart. "We can't force it," she said. "We must persuade it. The past must choose to change." The crew debated. Some wanted to drop a complete proposal, show the leaders what would happen if they continued on the same path. Others feared that would just push fear deeper. In the end, Alara made the call. They would not speak with words alone. They would use the drift. Inside the council chamber of the past, the Vesper shimmered into view, not as a threat, but as a visitor from a tomorrow yet to be. The delegates reacted with panic at first. Armed guards raised weapons. One of the older species, the Shiran, warned of forbidden time rituals. But Alara stepped forward calmly, her voice steady. "We are not here to harm you. We come from a future that needs you to make a better choice." And then the Vesper moved, not physically but emotionally. Through the drift, it reached into each delegate's mind and showed them 2 paths. One was the galaxy as it had become, torn by mistrust, bound by rules shaped by fear, growing more unstable with each passing year. They saw the spread of the drift, the rising tensions, the battles that hadn't needed to happen. They saw their own children grow up in systems where diplomacy had failed. And then the Vesper showed them the other path. They saw unity, not forced but chosen. They saw drift ships used to heal, not control. Scientists working side by side, cultures blending, in harmony, trade built on shared purpose. They saw humanity not as a threat but as a bridge, a species born too late to grow arrogant, yet early enough to see the flaws of those who had come before. The visions were not promises, they were possibilities, and that made them real. The council hesitated. The past was heavy, but it listened. In the hours that followed, old laws were rewritten. The founding agreement was reshaped with new principles: transparency, shared stewardship of advanced technologies, and protection of the drift's power. Drift tech would never be owned by one race. It would be guided by all. At the center of the new accord, one name appeared on every page: Vesper. The ship was no longer a leftover relic. It had become the anchor, an artifact of possibility that all would protect, not for what it could do, but for what it reminded them to become. The crew watched as their mission neared its end. The Vesper had fulfilled its role, not as a weapon, not even as a ship, but as a message. Humanity was no longer the weakest. They were the ones who had walked into the unknown, faced the worst outcomes, and still chosen to build instead of destroy. They were not rulers. They were now the stewards of the drift, a trust that came not with power but with responsibility. Alara stood one last time before the core. The ship's systems hummed softly. The timelines were no longer in conflict. The Council's new foundation was stable. She smiled faintly. "We did it," she said. "We changed the story." And as the Vesper began to lift away, its hull glowing brighter with every passing moment, it did not head for any known star. It turned toward the edge of thought, slipping not into space, but into possibility itself. No one saw where it went. No sensors could track it, but from that day forward, whenever something impossible happened, when an asteroid vanished just before a collision, when time bent for a second to save a life, when peace came from nowhere, people across the galaxy would pause and smile, and they would say the same thing.